start our recording.
All right, are we being recorded now?
Yes, we are ready to go.
And how are we doing minutes right now?
I'm taking them.
Who said that?
Sorry, this is Ashley. My connection is poor, so I'm gonna stay
Okay.
off
Not moving your lips, so I can't tell.
camera.
Okay, well, let's call the meeting to order. I have 6:07 p.m. on August 31st. And the meeting is called to order. And the first order of business is roll call. So I'm here, Jordan.
Present.
All right, Brian,
Present.
Tony,
Present.
Michael. I see your image, so I assume you were present. You're on mute.
Present. Sorry.
Okay. All right, so we have 5 members here, so good to go. We've got a quorum. All right, the first order of business after that is public comments. Citizens wishing to address the Planning and Zoning Commission for items not on the agenda will be received at this time. Comments need to be limited to 3 minutes. And if you want to address us on anything that is on the agenda, that will be done at the time that the agenda item is considered. Do we have any public comments for items that are not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. The next is consent agenda items. And the only one I see on our agenda tonight is discussion and possible action on the minutes from the August 11th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. And who said I approve and who said second?
Brian, motion to
I
approve.
move to approve. This is Brian Nash.
All right, and the second was whom?
Jordan.
Okay, I'm kind of moving between split screens right now. So let me maybe change my view here. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion of the minutes before we vote? All right, if not, all in favor of the consent agenda say aye, and let's take a roll call on that. Jordan,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
All right, and I vote aye, so the consent agenda is approved. The next item is to open the public hearing. It is 6:10 p.m. And we will open the public hearing, and anyone who wishes to speak at the public hearing at this time may do so. Is there anybody that wishes to speak at the public hearing?
Amy, I'll go ahead and address the commission. This item is to consider an amended plat. Amended plats can be administratively approved, but in this circumstance, staff has denied this plat. The applicant reached out at about 1:30 this afternoon and requested to waive their 30-day right to hearing to work on this plat further and try to come back with something that could be approved. So at this time, we don't need to consider this plat. The applicants are not here and want to-
Essentially, this is being pulled from the, right, because they've requested an
Yes.
extension. They've requested an extension of time and you've granted them the extension of time. So this is being pulled from the agenda.
All right, so 403 Farley Trail is off the agenda. And there's nothing else we need to do about it, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at the public hearing before we close it? All right, then the public hearing is closed at 6:12 PM and we'll go to our regular agenda. Item 5, and that is update, discussion, and possible action on the residential landscaping ordinance. Perhaps staff could put it up on the screen so we can be looking at it while we discuss it.
Sure, I can do that. Give me just,
Whoever's the host could maybe put that up there. For those of us who don't have 2 monitors, that would be helpful.
sure, I'm working on it. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so last month we had update, discussion, and possible action on a residential landscaping ordinance. And the commission instructed staff to return with some language for consideration. So I have included some language here. One would be to recommend to city council an ordinance that requires silt fencing for any residential landscaping work that could result in silt discharge, including but not limited to sod installation and turf installation. And this is a result of discussion about silt washing off of properties in the street. That was one of the questions that was the impetus for discussing a landscaping ordinance. The second action language item is to recommend to city council an ordinance to add a definition for retaining walls to specify the following, to specify that a retaining wall is any fence or wall built or designed to retain or restrain lateral forces of soil or other materials, said materials being similar in height to the height of the wall. And this definition came right from the Planner's Dictionary. Do y'all have any questions for me, or does anybody have anything to add?
Any
Do
commission
we,
want to ask any questions?
I'll raise my hand.
Jordan?
Yeah, do we think, when it says in the second definition, said materials being similar in height to the height of the wall, do we think that's defensible, or does that leave enough room for interpretation by designers and architects to continue with the loophole?
I think it's defensible. Charlie, is that defensible?
I'm sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. I didn't hear the question. I'm having a trouble. There's like occasionally there's like everyone slows in their speech when it gets to me and I can't understand it. So can we?
The question was, is similar in height to the height of the wall specific enough for us to defend it?
Oh man, I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to take a look at it.
I feel like
Harry, is that language in that you just read off? Is that in the packet, or is it in one of these presentations that we?
it's
that
in the
you sent out?
packet. It's the one sheet that's in the packet.
It's at
Let
the
me look
very
at that.
back.
And commissioners, maybe we offer that if y'all like the general concept of this, we would have the city attorney draft the ordinance when we would
Yes.
work with him on whether it was specific enough to enforce and those other issues. And then we'll bring that back to you
That's a
in
good-
ordinance form.
Amber, would the ordinance go back to P and Z, or would it go to straight to city council?
I think council directed planning and zoning to weigh in on this, so it would go back through planning and zoning.
Well, do we want to make a motion that staff, I guess it would be Charlie and staff collaborate to come up with a proposed ordinance and submit that at the next P and Z meeting?
That would be perfect. If
All
that
right.
works for you.
Can we, Jordan, you have a question? Or was that an old raised hand?
That was an old raised hand. I do want to talk about silt fencing though.
Can you remind me real quick, Carrie, too? I know we've talked about this 100 times, but the issue that we're trying to solve with the retaining walls is people are putting walls in places where they're not actually retaining anything and using them effectively as front yard fences. Is that the main issue? Okay. Well, I think to the extent that this solves that problem from your perspective, it seems like a good idea.
Brian, do you have a question?
Not so much a question, just a couple of comments, but I'll wait and if it's easier to do it in the context of a motion or something like that, I can wait and talk about it then.
Well, we can make a motion and then have a second, and then we can still discuss it before we take a vote.
My thinking on this, and I guess I'm kind of open to understanding a little bit more, but I guess I just don't see a huge need here. I feel like we're looking to create a regulation that I haven't seen there'd be a huge problem with. I know there's been some talk about how there's, and maybe Carrie can speak to this a little bit more in terms of like frequency and number of potential issues or violations that have come up over the last few years. But I'm not really kind of aware of any of these that have created a lot of problems. So I'd kind of like to better understand. I know we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting. So apologies for revisiting it, but on number 2, for example, I think the way that's written could end up being a little bit difficult to enforce still anyway. Like, I just don't know what it's going to mean to say it's similar in height to the height of the wall. And like on what side and like how much is similar and how much isn't, if it's like 2 feet of dirt on one side of the wall, but the wall continues up another 3.5 feet, is that going to be considered similar or not? So I don't know that you necessarily solve an enforcement problem, but like, aren't we already, I guess the problem has been that people, as Tony mentioned, have done some fences that they say are retaining walls when other people think they're not. But just how frequent is this a problem? Because I'm just worried that we're creating more regulations on top of regulations that are going to have enforcement problems anyway.
And to expand on that question are these, the ones that wind up as fences or perceived to wind up as fences, are those drawn as such and on the plans, or do they just kind of wind up being built?
Sure. So because there's not a definition for retaining wall, it put me and my predecessor in a situation of not wanting to make the call on what constitutes a retaining wall. And all of the retaining wall ordinances relate to corner lots. So there's nothing related to just a regular interior lot. Everything in the code relates to corner lots. So yeah, effectively people are putting up front yard fences that are not 80% visibility, that violate that, and they call it a retaining wall. And our viewers don't have the tools really in the toolbox to effectively deny that. Brian, you had another, I guess you asked how often this is coming up. It's come up a couple of times since I took over 2 years ago. I foresee it to continue to come up. I mean, I know that this commission's discussed not wanting to wall off properties you see in other areas. And because the restrictions are limited to corner lots and because there's no definition, there's nothing to stop somebody from putting up a wall, calling a retaining wall. If it's under 36 inches, it's considered landscaping. And then if it's over 36 inches, it's a retaining wall, but it doesn't, within our code, it doesn't actually have to retain anything. So I think rather than having generally these come up with projects that are pulling permits for other things. I think just having a definition would give us enough tools to be able to deny. And then if someone felt that we inappropriately denied, they could appeal our decision.
So they might submit a set of plans with a retaining wall marked on it currently, and that may not be anticipated to retain anything. I mean, do you ask that question at that time, or how will you enforce this? I guess if somebody draws a retaining wall on there and we have this ordinance in place, I guess you're just going to be asking the question of what that's retaining and on which side. And
Sure, we're going to be looking at grade in conjunction with the site development plan and making sure that there is actually something behind that wall as opposed to it just being. And
Are
then
there some examples that I could look at in the neighborhood of where this seems to have gone awry? Like, have there been calls of like, this is
yeah, I mean,
problematic?
I don't want to call anyone out. There's I can think of 6 off the top of my head if you drive around. I'm reluctant to call anybody out on camera because it's not any person who has one. It's just it's a result of the code we've got. So it's not like I don't want to imply that anybody intentionally was or unintentionally trying to skirt the rules.
And is that, Carrie, is that 6 total or 6 that have been done recently?
I would say within the last 4 years.
It's 6 in the last 4 years that look like fences, but were described as retaining walls, and therefore were given that was the loophole that they exploited. Is that we're kind of contending? Well, I don't know how to. It's really hard for me to kind of. It's not that I don't believe you. I kind of need to see what this looks like. I don't know how somebody can make a fence into a retaining wall. I mean, I do think that you're able to call a fence a fence. Oh, let me ask this question then, Carrie. In your sort of capacity as the building official, can't you say that's a front yard fence and therefore subject to the fence regulation, and you violate that, and so I'm denying that building permit on that basis?
I guess I have a question. Why is it a problem if we make our ordinances more specific, even if it's not a common occurrence?
Yeah, that's what staff's asking for, is just to be more specific. I mean, it wouldn't change the permitting process. It would just give us.
Well, as a lawyer, I usually want, in whatever I'm looking at, when I need to know what I'm supposed to be doing, I want as much specificity as possible. I don't know that that's necessarily creating new rules and regulations as much as it's just defining what a retaining wall is and where it's appropriate. Wouldn't that be a building issue?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess, Carrie, that's what you're saying, is just having something, you know, referencing generally what a retaining wall is, gives you the ability to say to somebody, I think this is a fence, not a retaining wall, for this reason.
So Carrie, does this solve the problem? Let's say two hypotheticals where somebody builds a retaining wall and then they build another retaining wall 4 feet over and they fill it all with dirt and they call it a planter. It's retaining soil. Even though it may not have been necessary, is one hypothetical. Another hypothetical is somebody builds a wall and they just berm up to the other side, right? Slope the ground at whatever, 45 degrees so that it's retaining dirt unnecessarily on one side in order to make it look like a fence, say, on the outside. So how does this, I mean, it doesn't really address those things.
I feel like it just saying that it is restraining lateral forces of soil is sufficient. You can berm up and you can build a retaining wall and berm up to it if you're grading the rest of your property, as long as you're meeting the drainage criteria manual. So it essentially would be ground level of what you bermed, or, you know, below, to create a terrace situation, rather than serving as a barrier.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know that that addresses the aesthetics. If you only care, I mean, if we're trying to address the openness of how lots look from the street, well, you could, you know, I mean, I know you still have what, 3 feet within 15 feet of the curb, and then the wall can get higher as you step back or whatever. But, you know, you could still build a wall, just build a little tiny berm and say it's restraining dirt. And in effect, if you're on the outside looking in, it looks like a wall, you know, a fence.
Well, if we are if people are using these as part of landscaping, I mean, I know I walk around Rollingwood a lot and I see landscaping that probably looks like it's terraced with retaining walls, you know, several of them.
Sure.
And it looks nice. But I guess it's just a matter of defining what it is. It doesn't mean we're not allowing it or anything.
That's my intention, is not to allow or disallow, but just put some language behind what we're allowing.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not just saying we're using them for structural purposes. Somebody could use it for aesthetic purposes, right?
Mhm.
Well, this answers a lot of my questions. I mean, if it's going to make your job easier, Carrie, I'm in support of doing something to get you a definition that you can use to distinguish between a fence and a retaining wall. I don't want us to get into the business of creating like more regulations on top of regulations. That's just the only reason why I was asking these questions. And I guess to your point, Michael, I guess my sort of inclination, although I'm open-minded about it, is I don't want us to get into the aesthetics of landscaping design now. So that's where I'm just like, I feel like we already have plenty in place. What we need to do is clarify what is in place to make sure that people have that clarity and know when they can or cannot do something. And Carrie can tell them when, like, have definition in terms of enforcement. So I mean, I guess if somebody does do what you're describing, I'm not opposed to it, just because it's like, well, they would have been able to do that under the old, like the existing structure anyway. I think most people do things to be relatively aesthetically pleasing because that increases their property value. So, you know, I'm for this. If people want to, sorry for having asked a lot of questions, but it all makes sense to me now. I get what you're needing to do here.
Are we ready for anybody to make a motion on this?
I think, Jordan, did you want to talk about item 1, 2, the silt fence thing, or are you good on that?
Are we splitting this into 2 motions, or are we making 1 motion covering both?
You can do it either way.
Well, I know that the one Jordan wanted to talk about was ahead of this one, so we could double back. Jordan, you have anything you want to say on that?
Silt fences are kind of a pain in the butt for swapping out grass. So I'm trying to understand what the issue is, kind of like Brian, like how much of this is this really an issue of turf replacement causing a lot of drainage out into the street?
Sure. So we do have a fair amount of it. And the issue is that we're over the recharge zone, and you're not required to have silt fencing unless and until you discharge, but discharges are not permitted by our municipal stormwater permit. So this would just require, and it wouldn't be limited. You could put a drain sock or straw bales or some other sort of method for controlling it. But it would be easier for us to be able to reach out to people when they've got these projects and inform them. I'm trying to kind of walk the line between not creating additional processes and not creating issues where there aren't any, but also give us the to help work with people so that we don't have these discharges and get sideways with TCEQ.
I think I'm generally supportive of that goal and happy to do it. As we know, sometimes council and staff can get a little pedantic on enforcement of these things. And there may be cases where there isn't a threat of any drainage into a neighbor's yard or into the street or anything, and yet sod's getting turned, gotta have a silt fence, and these aren't inexpensive. I forget the quotes on running them. I just did one on a demolition. The city of Austin requires it for demolition. I can't remember. They're not inexpensive. I'm like, for grass, like, but maybe I just don't understand it that, so I think I'm fine with it. Especially if you're saying there's other mechanisms by which we can put in that are simpler and easier for just the person trying to replace their front yard sod to say, look, if there's a big rain, we want to keep all that dirt on your property. So do you, for that matter. It may not be a silt fence. Typically silt fences were done to like strain and screen, and this is just trying to keep dirt, mud, runoff on the property so it doesn't flow out into the street and eventually into our streams and waterways. Okay, well,
Maybe it would be more appropriate to amend the language to just say silt control rather than silt fencing.
I think that's a good compromise. Yeah, I think it's a good way of that. And it's a way that if you guys know a storm's coming, you can run around and see somebody's got a whole front yard full of dirt, and we all just know that's about to end up in our streams and get TCQ on us. You have some power to go in and say, hey, please do this now, kind of a thing. So I'm up for that.
All right, I see two hands up. I'm not sure who put their hand up first because I was looking at the ordinance, the proposed.
I defer to Michael Rhodes to go first, so feel free. I think I did enough.
Michael, what would you like to say something?
I was second too. What a gentleman, Brian. Thank you. Can we give an exception for like if it's replaced in 24 hours or something? I'm kind of with Jordan, like it is expensive and time consuming. And if you're, if you are conscientious about it, you can very easily replace sod by looking at the weather and do it in a manner that, wouldn't require a silt fence. So I don't know. I'd like to create some flexibility for folks if they're doing it quickly, what have you, because then it just gets in the way and you got to take it right back out. But I don't want to complicate your life either.
So, yeah, I would try to build in flexibility too, for the same reasons that Jordan and Michael are noting. I kind of trust, I don't want to create additional work for you, Carrie, but I feel like this should be at your discretion. So if there's somebody that's replacing 2 bushes and a planter and maybe a little bit of sod, and it's all in like a 5x5 area, I mean, we don't want that person to have to go out and get silt fencing. If there's somebody that's doing a full-blown couple $100,000 landscape redesign, yeah, sure, probably. But then it's probably been included in whatever contractor's bid anyway. And I think, whatever the cases are in between, it should really just come down to whether our very competent city staff believe that this is one that requires it or not. That's how I would like to see something written, just some rule of reason or at the building official's discretion type of thing. Because I share the same concerns that Michael and Jordan. I just don't want there to be some additional thing where people are like, aha, you dug up a plant yesterday and didn't have a silt fence, and so we're going to villainize you for it.
Tony, another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to expand on that too. I guess the including but not limited to sod insulation. I was just thinking about, my yard. I could replace the sod in my front yard without just the way my yard is sloped. There wouldn't be any issue of, any discharge anywhere other than back into my house. So, I don't know if saying every time somebody replaces sod, I think it kind of depends on the circumstances, as some other people have elaborated on. But I wonder if, if just saying that, silt control for any residential landscaping work that, I don't know, is likely to or could result in silt discharge, if just having something on the books then has, gives you something to point to. I guess the issue there may be, I guess once it's happened, it's too late at that point. Maybe if you go to somebody and say you got all this stuff running in the street and here's the ordinance that says you're not allowed to do that, I guess at that point it's already a problem. I'm just thinking if you don't have to come and pull a permit for the landscaping work, are people going to know that this ordinance exists until they've violated it?
Do we have any further comments? Would one of you, I think it seems to make sense that we split this up into 2 motions, one on the silt fencing, one on the retaining walls. Does anybody want to make a motion having to do with rewriting an ordinance on silt fencing?
Put the language back up. Is that possible, Carrie? Are you able to share your screen again? That was really helpful earlier.
Absolutely. Give me just a second.
Carrie, I'm just also one more question. I know we have an enforcement mechanism, a fine right now. Is it too, I don't know, ambiguous or risky to just say that you'll be fined if any silt discharges from your property or what have you?
So
We probably already have that, but
it's tied to building permits. So I can cite the way that it's written. I can cite the property owner for an MS4 violation, not the builder. It goes to the property owner.
and that's only for active building permits?
Yes.
So if there's no building permit, you have no mechanism to fine?
I can cite once there is a discharge, but I can't require anyone to put up anything to mitigate preemptively. I can't say, hey, look, you've got your property all torn up, it drains toward the street, it's gonna rain in 3 days, you have to put silt fencing up. So I say, no. Okay, then we can wait, and then hopefully PD documents it and can go over there and write a ticket. But without documentation, and an ordinance, I can't really do anything about it.
And how much is the fine?
$2,000 per offense for a
Oh,
for a builder. When the property's under permit. When the property's not under permit, it's around $500.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Tony. Like, I don't know how if we pass this. I mean, the professionals put up silt fence anyways. I just don't know how people are gonna know. Like, realistically, what tool? I mean, I guess it gives you the tool to go around and tell them there's an ordinance that will result in a fine, but it's still the same fine if they don't do anything, right?
Still the same fine. If it's the same fine if there's a discharge. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, we talked at the last meeting about kind of I guess the last two meetings about trying to maybe get away from having people pull permits for landscaping when they want to do this minor work, which I'm in support of that. But so just trying to tighten up the language to
Carrie, you're not in support of it, but I thank you for reflecting the desires of this commission in your language. So y'all, as you recall, the request was, let's do some, as Carrie referred, let's start permitting all landscaping. And we're not and have not been in favor of adding another permitting process to what is generally simple issues. We do, just so y'all know, part of, I forget what it's called, and Carrie and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like M4E or something like that, which are the sort of state TCEQ mandated guidelines do have an educational component that the city has to comply with. So the way they get the word out, y'all, is through education, through those letters that we get in our bills, through the website, through just discussion to start getting out that, hey, when you do some pretty heavy landscaping, you can create runoff. You need to use silt barriers to help prevent that, or else the city can get fined and will in turn fine you. So it's just getting the word out. I mean, Tony, it's like you paying your pulling permit on your water heater. You're probably the only person I've known who's done that. Probably because you knew about it. There's just, you guys bring up good points. Just know that I believe there's part of the city mandate is that there is an education component to our stormwater permit. So I will say I was hesitant at the beginning. I'm now fully in favor, especially if this avoids us from having to create any sort of permitting process for landscape work.
I'm against the permitting process for landscaping work. I'll make a motion to that effect.
Well, I don't know if that's on the agenda or not.
I know. Sorry, bad joke.
I think the question is, I mean, again, you guys know more about this than I do probably, but isn't a lot of it having to do with prevention rather than cure? And again, I'm totally with you on the issue of not requiring permitting for landscaping unless it's something, humongous. But, I just know the last time I was on P&Z, we would often have developers who felt that it was always better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. And so, anything we can do to clarify what is expected of people seems to me to be a good thing, as long as we're not creating more bureaucracy by doing
That was Jordan. I'm sure of it.
that. At least
It really wasn't, but I wish it was.
Hearing here as a cat or something. Do we have any further comment, or does anybody want to make a motion?
I got a quick question. Carrie, do we have, I should probably know this, but is there somewhere in the code that discusses landscaping, even though we obviously don't have to pull a permit, that is where this would logically go. In other words, if somebody, decides they're going to do, just the average homeowner, they bought their house a few years ago, now I'm going to do a big landscape project, consult with a landscape, designer, builder, whatever. I would think that most, professional firms would say, well, we need to check to see with your city if there's any, permits required or things we need to know. And then presumably would go reference, the city codes, and then see a section on landscaping that this would be a part of. I mean, is that how it could potentially be? Because if that's the case, maybe it's an education. My concern of people not even realizing it until it's already happened, may be true, at least at the beginning. But if we put this in and, maybe over time, it's an education process. Once a few people, screw up, maybe people start to learn, and maybe it's already a scenario where somebody's doing a big enough project that's likely to create runoff. Maybe, if they're using a professional, they'll see this in consulting the codes and ordinances.
Quiet because I'm looking at I'm pulling the landscaping information.
I know when I hired a landscape design build firm, they, asked about what the city requirements are. But of course, I recommended that firm to somebody else that lives in Westlake Hills, and they've had massive issues because they didn't do it properly.
I'll have to go back and pull the ordinances, but essentially what we have is a vision clearance ordinance for corners that requires things to be back 15 feet. And then that defines what is included as landscaping as being under 36 inches, 36 inches or less. That's all we've got.
Well, I think I've come around to Jordan. I mean, we can put this in there if you're doing landscape work that is likely, or how we can talk about the wording and have the attorneys draft it, but that is likely to create runoff. You're responsible for creating a plan to manage, and prevent that runoff. And hopefully when people start to do projects, they'll go look in the, go search for the word landscape within the document and find that and abide by it. And if they don't, it'll give you some recourse to point to when you're going to find them or ask them to put one up.
Do we have any further discussion on the silt fencing issue? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve both.
All right. We have a motion to approve both the silt fencing proposal and the retaining wall proposal, correct, Michael?
Correct.
All right, do we have a second?
Do we have a specific proposal that we're on the silt fencing? I mean, is that motion the language as exactly written in number 1 right now?
I know that there was a question that was raised by Jordan about substituting some language.
What we could take this motion to mean is that we will work with Charlie and draft an ordinance and bring it back to y'all.
I like that.
Perfect.
All right, so that's the motion. Michael, is that all right?
I love it.
Accept that as your motion?
If Carrie likes it, I like it.
All right, well, do we have a second for that motion?
Tony will
Sure.
second it.
All right, so Michael's made the motion, Tony has seconded it. Let's, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I think I heard 5 ayes, is that correct? Do we have any nays? All right, motion carries. So let's go on to the next item on our agenda, which has to do with curb cuts and driveways. And Amber, if you are the one who is hosting, can you put that proposal up on the screen so we can see it?
See it?
Okay, all right. Well, let's go ahead and open discussion on this. Who would like to start out?
This is Jordan. I know we went pretty far in depth on this in our past couple of meetings. I think this is a creative solution of limiting it so it's not sort of an infinite number of curb cuts, and also limiting the amount of linear apron width. I think it kind of hits on a lot of the topics of where we had sort of ended up last time. So I'm comfortable in support of this language as a recommendation for the ordinance.
All right, Jordan, would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that we recommend that staff bring ordinance language to planning and zoning for us to review for this, similar to our last one.
And like you say, Jordan, we have had very extensive discussions of this previously. Is there anybody, I'm happy to second that motion.
Okay.
So do we have any further discussion?
Carrie, I just had a question. I reviewed your presentation, by the way. Thank you. That was really great. Do we need to talk in the context of this about the the hard topped and the various materials, or should we just, is that a kind of a separate?
I think we can move on from that. I think
Okay.
based on our discussion, this is as much as we need. I think we're okay with.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I think, yeah, I agree that these look like pretty good solutions based on the prior discussion that we've had on this.
It says 3 total curb cuts. I assume that means 3 pairs of curb cuts, right? Or I guess, because you're cutting in, I don't know.
No, I think it's a single curb cut. So the only way you can have 3 is if you have a corner lot, because there's only 2 on a single street frontage limitation. And then if you had a third, it would have to be a corner lot on the side street. That's my understanding.
That was mine.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess it sounds like it makes sense to me on a normal lot. If there was a really big lot that was an entire city block, I wouldn't have a problem with there being more curb cuts. But I suppose that's when somebody goes and asks for a variance or something.
Exactly.
And do they have to demonstrate a hardship?
Yes, though driveway variances go to P and Z, and so the hardship criteria is different. There's
I
no-
see. So it doesn't go to the Board of Adjustment. It would come back to us.
I think those are just
No.
the corner lot ones.
Yeah, only the corner lot ones that are on different streets go to P and Z. If y'all pass this kind of language, it would have to go to BOA.
Or they can subdivide.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I heard 4 ayes. Do we have any nays? Okay, maybe I heard wrong.
No, I'm not an aye or a nay.
All right, you're
I guess I'm
abstaining.
abstaining.
All right, we'll have you down as abstaining. All right, moving on. I guess the next issue is future dates for P and Z.
Yes. Can y'all hear me okay?
What dates are we looking at right now?
So the current schedule is the first Wednesday of the month. We did want to ask everyone, because we are moving away from Zoom meetings, so this will be the last Zoom meeting. Technically, our next meeting would have been tomorrow for September, but obviously we won't be having that meeting, so I guess we're looking at October. And we did want to gauge the commission's interest in continuing on the first Wednesday, making sure that was still working for everyone, as well as what time. We had moved it up a little bit during Zoom meetings, and staff is, amenable to other meeting times. Usually they were held at 7 p.m. And we have kind of discussed it and would be interested in moving the meeting earlier if that would be something that the commission would be interested in. A lot of us live pretty far away from City Hall, so the 2-hour gap sometimes is kind of a long time to wait for a meeting. However, we do understand that y'all have to get to City Hall and everything as well. So whatever the commission decides to do, we will be okay with.
Well, my schedule is pretty flexible if I know in advance when I have to be somewhere. Any other comments about moving the meeting up? Right, I mean, normally it's at 7, I think, and I mean, I'm fine personally with moving it up, but we need to hear from everybody.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I'm happy to move it up as long as we know. And Wednesday's a good day, so whatever. I think, if it's better for staff to move it up, sounds great.
I'm pretty locked into first Wednesdays. For, monthly meeting, I would hate to change the day. I can do earlier. So that works if that's what we want to do. I know I will say we've struggled in the past for people to get home from downtown and make it to the meeting on time. So
Yeah, I think that can be a little bit challenging for me now. Right now, the traffic still is not, horrible. So, that's 6 o'clock is probably manageable. It probably increases the likelihood of me being a little late, but it sounds like everybody else is on board. And I'll, planning in advance, I'll hopefully be able to make it work out.
Well, it's nice also if these run late, at least they'll run an hour less.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, well then I think I don't think we need a motion on that, do we? We can just go ahead and schedule it.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. We'll go ahead and update the recurring meeting invite for 6 p.m. on the first Wednesday. And then just try to get those meeting notices out, a couple weeks in advance and get our attendance.
And I guess there's no chance of the state changing and allowing Zoom to last any longer. Has that already been fully vetted? Everything's going back in person?
It doesn't look like it right now. Technically, as of tomorrow, they all have to be back normal. And we are working on a hybrid meeting option. We're not quite sure how well we're going to be making it work yet, or if we'll have it in place by the next meeting. But there are still more requirements that require a quorum of the board to still be physically present at City Hall. So a few members may be able to join virtually and some audience members might be able to, but as of right now, we're trying to operate as if we're fully back in person.
Well, and I guess state government is dictating what we do down here, right? We don't have local control on this issue.
Correct. Yeah, that's straight from the governor and the attorney general. And we aren't able to require masks for fully in-person meetings. So we have asked for kind of, an extension of the Zoom meeting option from the governor. We have not received any information on that. So as of right now, it's looking like we're kind of stuck.
Good luck with that. Yeah, so I guess we have to go back to in person. We can't even tell people they have to be masked if they come in. Okay. Well, thanks for all you do. and we will see everybody. I guess we are adjourned.
Hope you all have a great evening. Take care.
Yep, thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Buddy.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.